Tonight we're going to have a first for us, which is an open discussion which is organised by the Manchester Salon, and it features and concentrates on the idea, is there art in them there hills? The basic premise is we've got all these 55 different venues all over New Mills with what you should agree is the highest possible standard of the visual arts. And in the words of Simon, who's helped to organise tonight, something's going on. What is it? What is it that makes New Mills and this area special?
There has been a fascination with the city among contemporary artists recently. It's been a sort of place where it seems it's authentic and where people can search for some kind of truth, and where there's a kind of place for critical thought as well. And looking at this and seeing what's happening here, I sense that there's a kind of counter-movement here, where a preference by some artists to move away from the city and to live and to work in the edges of the city and in the rural settings. And I think that's what's interesting, and I think that's really what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to unpick that and find out what's driving it and where it's taking us. Anne's going to speak first, and Anne Jackson leads the New Mills University of the Third Age, where she teaches art history and leads the art history appreciation
I lead the art history group. We look at art history and art appreciation.
And John is a poet, an author. He's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and is the honorary creative writing fellow at Leicester University. And his most recent books, he's written 6 books, but his most recent book is Full Blood.
Just nicely modelled.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks. And our third speaker is James Hartfield, and James is a writer and lecturer, and he's founding director of the development think tank Audacity, and lives in North London, where he works at the University of Westminster. And James is also an author and has written a number of books, including The Death of the Subject Explained, and his latest book is The Aborigines Protection Society, Humanitarian Imperialism in Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Canada, South Africa and the Congo.
My brief was to think about why artists settle here. Do the Pennines inspire artists? Or is it all part of this trend to look for culture?
Anne, there's some people at the back there saying, could you stand up?
Oh,
could you stand up and speak up, please?
Yes. They're having right at the back. It's the acoustics, if you could.
Right.
Thank you, Anne.
A little bit little as well. So, the artists settling here, is it all just part of this wider trend for culture, a focus on culture? And yes, I think that is part of it, because we see culture everywhere, don't we? It's the buzzword now. Cafes, places like that, culture on the television. It's very trendy to be cultural. But my first thoughts were, oh, it's the wonderful hills, it's the windswept hills, the kind of things you get in the Bronte novels. It's all that kind of thing. But then I realised artists always paint where they are. You've got that from Canaletto to Stanley Spencer. They always paint the places where they are. It's an area where you can walk, you can come across nature, and this is it does inspire the artists. But why did they come here in the first place? People have moved here because their spouses have got jobs, maybe in Manchester, and they've looked around and have come across New Mills, it's so attractive, and they've settled here. But there's a snowball effect as well, because there are artists who are here and they have attracted other artists. There's also the physicality of the place. It's not linear, it's compact, isn't it? It holds a certain amount of people, and everybody knows each other. And this is the other thing, all the artists know each other. and they get comfort and support from that. They've got the lovely gallery, which is a cooperative, where they show their works and hopefully sell works. But what they have to do is work for a number of days or hours in the year. I'd like to mention the New Mills Community Potters as well. They're a collective. And participation as well, and we do have this in New Mills. New Mills is a wonderful place. We do have the participation in New Mills. We've got the New Mills Community Arts, and they deal with people with mental problems, marital problems, disabilities. And I know through learning floristry what it's like for somebody who they've not created anything in their lives, and then they've got someone to show them how to make these wonderful paper patterns that you can see in New Mills Library. So it gives people a boost. One thing that I found out, which I thought was amazing, I found this out, I've spoken to so many artists in the last week. What I found out from one of the artists is that it is cheaper to rent a studio in Manchester, in Salford, than it is in a place like Hebden Bridge, and I know John Siddiqui lives in Hebden Bridge. So there must be some reason for that. It's obviously the people who are there in Hebden Bridge. It's an arty place. But you would expect the opposite.
Lovely to be here. I'm John Siddiq, and I'm from that place of Hebden Bridge. Hebden has this reputation, I suppose, of being a very arty place, and even Anne said it's a very arty place there. I don't think it's very true in a way. I suppose for a long time, what it was really famous for was fustian cotton. We had 27 trouser factories and 9,000 people living in the valley, kind of walking down with clogs and what have you. And Sylvia Plath, when she came to stay with Ted's parents in 1959, if you look in her journals, she bloody hated the place. It was a dirty, grim, black place full of smoke and what have you, and she was sitting in the Stubbing Wharf pub, surrounded by spit and sawdust and men with flat caps and whippets. I've hidden my flat cap, actually. And it got so bad, actually, that nobody wanted to live there, that it was slated for being demolished. The whole town was going to be demolished in 1968, 69, and it's where the M62 was going to be. But because the housing was so cheap, in fact, you didn't have to pay for houses, or you could get a house for sort of 25 to 50 quid. Kind of hippies and outsider types moved in with a kind of bit of an intellectual bent, and suggested that the M62 go elsewhere, which is why the M62 is where it is today. So there's signs in Hebden Bridge of 500 years of creativity and stuff like that, but utter and complete bullshit is the truth of that, really. No, nobody wanted the place at all until about sort of 30 years ago. The thing about Hebden is, like I say, it has this reputation, but it's only, I've been there sort of 15 years now, I think it is, 14 or 15 years, and it's only in the last couple of years that I've actually really started enjoying it, because like most places, there are dark sides to places, and when you come to Hebden, you see the coffee shops and the little art galleries and the reputation it's also art and all that sort of thing. But we've got a very, very high suicide rate, terrible drug problems. We've got what you might call an underclass who are completely not seen, and real kind of gentrification and divisions, which are not kind of addressed at all. But as for being an artist there, I don't think I kind of think of myself as being kind of I don't know if there's a Hebden Bridge clique. I mean, we have Northlight art galleries, we have the handmade parade, we have a winter kind of light parade, and we have a bonfire thing. This weekend's been a blues festival. We have the Trades Club, where you get lots of bands coming and playing, which was opened by Karl Marx in the 1800s. He actually sort of founded it when he was in Manchester. You get Patti Smith coming over and people like that. So we have this kind of reputation. But it also has, like I say, this dark side. A lot of people come to get very drunk and very stoned there because the police don't come anywhere near it over the weekend, and things like that. and it can be a very isolating and lonely place because it sustains this this kind of middle class bubble where everybody's very nice, but nobody kind of really bothers with you apart from saying hello in the street. But you'll die alone in your house out of loneliness, you know. It has its kind of plus sides and its kind of downsides for me. The thing that I've enjoyed about it over the years is I come from a very kind of sort of lower working class background, and then found myself being artistic in Rochdale of all places. So you know, nobody knows what to make of you at all. And the thing with Hebden is that it lets the kind of it kind of holds my wildness. I don't know how else to kind of say it really. I'm not kind of a nice sociable kind of artist in any way. Ask my partner here, she'll tell you. I'm like a crazed being when I'm working. Not crazed, but I kind of go into very deep places that needs a lot of space. And we have a very big sky and this kind of sort of these tall hills, and you go out on top of them, and somehow that holds my soul enough for me to be able to create things without me turning into some kind of, you know, alcoholic kind of crazed person. So I don't drink or anything, but that would be the alternative if I didn't have this thing to hold me. I mean, I can't honestly think of living anywhere else. I have considered London. London to me seems just like another village, really. It seems to, within literature anyway, has a very kind of village kind of mentality. And I know the media is based there, and you get the chance to go to the right parties. And if you do, then you get kind of the British Council sending you here and sending you there. But actually, to be a real artist, you are on your own. You might have kind of supportive people and things like that, but nobody moving to a place is not going to make you an artist, you know. With London, it seems to me that London has kind of rendered itself pretty useless in a way, because it's cut itself off. Anywhere that ignores over 50 million people and thinks that it's a thing of its own, without kind of reference to the rest of the country, well, it's made itself kind of obsolete in a way. You know, it doesn't consider us at all up here. There is something in the hills. There is. The Pennines are very special. There's that kind of bleakness, which has this beauty, which allows something to come out of us. Sometimes we almost need a kind of a wall to project against, I suppose. And I think with art, it's a case of kind of, you know, having a wall to kind of show your colours against. And I think the Pennines are that. I think the Pennines will allow something to kind of come through in the spirit in a way. Yeah, I think we'll stop there. It's just the beauty of the bleak is the projection of the soul. I think that's the place to stop. Yeah, thank you.
We're standing, aren't we? I come from London, so I did grow up in Elland, and I knew Hebden Bridge when I was a boy in the 70s. There were artists there in the 70s. I think Bill Gaiman, the photographer, was there, and it did have. I mean, you could get a cream tea basically in the 70s. You couldn't get a coffee. You could get a cream tea, and it was kind of tourist-ish. You know, it was even then. There was quite a fad, as there still is, for industrial archaeology. I think coming back, I feel the call, the siren call of the northern vernacular, and I see it in the works and I see it here, and you know, maybe that is an outsider's view, but I think it's good and interesting, and I want to think about it. And I don't know about you, but I'm very much enjoying Happy Valley. I think Sally Wainwright's you know, journey around Halifax and Huddersfield is beautiful, and it's absorbing, and it's an interesting presentation, as was Last Tango in Halifax, and I think they're both intriguing for the as a presentation of the Pennines to the world, and the use of landscape. And of a particular kind of landscape. I think Pauline referred to this idea of landscape which isn't nature, or isn't bare nature anyway. It's a kind of halfway, and that's very much the Pennines. I think is that it is an industrial space as well as a rural space. You see it, I think, also again in the works of the painter Judith Tucker, who's very interested in the concrete and the stone within the moss, and exploring space as not a kind of romantic field, but as in that spirit of industrial archaeology. So I think the whole question of the northern vernacular is a compelling one, and not one I think that is easy to escape, and quite what it means I think is an interesting question. I think you see it in writing, where there's a northern comedy which is essentially a mock. It works as a mock of high ambitions. You know, if you read it's in Peter Tinniswood or in Keith Waterhouse novels, there essentially it's to make fun of pretension, and I think it's important, a demotic spirit that tears down a rather over highfalutin idea. You see it, by the way, it's the meaning of the title, isn't it? Last Tango in Halifax, which works. It's like a Alexander Pope heroic couplet, isn't it? We get the last tango, but it's not Paris, it's Halifax, and it's in her work, I think, as well, which is a good exploration of gender, you know, and really interesting on what it is to be a woman of years, you know, to be, and the characters are kind of wrecks and survivors, and coping with a masculine world that has fallen away, which I think is all particularly interesting. You didn't mention the most important thing about Hebden Bridge from the outside, which is it is the lesbian capital of Britain. And it's, I mean, this is is an outsider's fascination. And was it, you know, I'm trying to think in my childhood, we knew, though long before, you know, if you go to Shibden Hall in Halifax, that Anne Lister, who kept Shibden Hall, would always wear men's clothes and had a lover. And her diaries were only really translated in 94, I think they were published. But you could tell, by the way, you know, we all knew what it meant when we saw the portrait of Anne Lister. There was in Shibden Hall then, I don't know if it's there now, but it features in all the books. And they're interesting kind of investigations of the kind of what it means to be a man or to be a woman, to be of age, all things that are looking. I want to say as well, though, that vernacular can have different meanings. I read both in the painter Judy Tucker's work, but also in Sally Wainwright's work, there's a kind of elegiac quality. I read it actually in some of these things that we're looking at, and I feel somewhat alienated. I want to say there's something sad, too sad, about the living in the past, always kind of overwhelmed by the shadow of the past, and I think that's a kind of a quality about the way the arts have lived in this shell of the industrial world, which may be kind of slightly overwhelming. And I'd rather, I'd like to suggest as well, there is another way of the vernacular, a different meaning, and I'll suggest the work of the great Leeds painter, now dead, artist, Tony Earnshaw, for whom the vernacular was a mock of pretension. And he wrote, he did a number of cartoons and paintings. He wrote the series The View from the Back of Town. And the back of the town was a place which kind of belied the reality. And it was an interesting use, I thought, of the rhythms and bluntness of being northern, was that it was a tearer down of pretensions and did some powerful things. That's about all I want to say, really. And I think I'm responding in a way to what I'm seeing, which is what it is to be the vernacular, what it is to be in these hills.
Some of the things that struck me about what all of you were saying, really, is maybe a feeling that there's a sort of jaded feeling about in art at the moment, in the sense that certainly if you look at the cities and the urban centres, there's a sense that everything's kind of all boxed off and everything is bureaucratized and there's a lot of administration. And what James was talking about, that kind of blunt northern vernacular, is actually the opposite of that. It's opposite of that kind of metropolitan sensibility that wants everyone to feel comfortable and wants to measure everything, and is really quite limiting on the human imagination. So that was one of the things I'd like to sort of ask about, really, or to ask you to think about. The this kind of working in this kind of landscape and working outside of the flagship art centres of the city centre, does it make artists freer? Do artists feel freer to explore themes and to write about them? Certainly, like the northern novels of the 50s and 60s came at all sorts of things that no one in polite society would ever have wanted to talk about or think about. And we have a different kind of polite society now, where artists have to be very respectful to all sorts of in different ways. And I wonder if there's a sort of freedom here working in this area.
I am sure that the artists around here feel freer, because, as I said, I've been speaking to them. They don't want the constraints of
Can you hear? Oh, and you're going to have to maybe.
I am sure that some artists around here feel good about what they're doing, that they like to be free of the constraints of someone telling them what they should be painting, what they should be producing. This is what came across to me very much in the last week when I've been speaking to the artists. And they have got that freedom. Maybe not all of them, because obviously I did speak to all of them.
I personally can't speak for any other artist. I think that it's interesting. I was at Leeds train station the other day and I bumped into the guy who's the literature officer for Yorkshire for the Arts Council, and we were just sort of saying, there is some money if you want to apply for some kind of thing. And because I don't apply for Arts Council money, I used to, and I kind of stopped. And he says, but it's a bit gimmicky, and that's the problem, I think, with when you go for the. It's almost like unless you have a digital strand, unless you have there's a blog involved. What workshops are you going to do? I want to write a bloody book, about some rocks and trees, I mean the word that they use these days is psychogeography. But I just want to. I'm interested at the moment in kind of the effect of as the landscape as metaphor for what's inside the person, And that's what my next book's going to be about. So I won't get any Arts Council funding for that. It's not likely, unless I can digitise it in some way and whatever. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that that there is that way, but because if you want to go for the money side, I guess, then there is that kind of that reductive, kind of relativistic sort of aspect to it. With my own work, I've never. And the older I get, kind of the worse I get in a way, and that I think that the northern, the thing that James talked about, that northern kind of wanting to tear things down, gets even stronger, actually. So there must be something in the water,
Although with the Arts Council, the grant, also comes the sort of imprimatur, or the recognition that what you are doing is art.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how do you know what you're doing here? How do you measure the value of it? In a sense, do you have a critical kind of community here that responds to work that's done here? Or does it go public, or how do you?
No, dear, that's the thing. I think the problem with going down that route of the Arts Council route or whatever is that there's no room to fail. So there's no actual significant creation a lot of the time. That there's a kind of a playing safe. But unless you can completely crash and burn and something not work out in any way, shape or form, there's no way to actually make a piece of art. You have to have the space to completely mess up. Otherwise, you're never going to put your heart over the fence. You're going to just play nice. Oh, I was kind of successful like this before, so I'll just do that again. You get some people who write the same book over and over and over again, kind of thing, and don't try something new. So, I don't know.
I thought it'd be good to reflect on this, this exercise here as a model, which has got a very light touch of administration, quite a strong voluntary element. But mostly it's the shops and volunteers that are carrying this event, and I think there's very little top-down administration. And I think it's quite pointedly kind of producer-led. I think that's one thing which is interesting. But it begs a question also, I suppose. Well, where is the harsh judgment in a way? Is this creativity for the producers, or is it? Where is the public choosing, or is there? There's no bureaucrat choosing, but what's driving this creativity here?
What's your relationship as an artist to your public? Do you have you write books do you judge your merit as an artist, or your work and how it's progressing? Is that something that you would measure from the feedback you get from people?
No, not at all. Because I've always been a reader since I was whatever age. I picked up a book and then read my way through Rochdale Library and things, thanks to my school teacher. In my head, this might sound pompous, but in my head I've got Pablo Neruda and E. Cummings and Jean Rhys, George Orwell, and I know what a good book is. And if I can't, when I write something, I tend to kind of try to visualise it being on the shelf with the people that I love. And if it's not fit to go there, and that's not being big-headed, but they kind of, that my writing workshop is those people. But at the same time, I would never put anything out that I don't get to stop me getting an overinflated sense of myself. I have a couple of close readers, my friend Catherine Smith, who's a well-known poet, and an academic called Claire Chambers, who actually teaches my work on her course, a post-colonial studies course at York. And so they're the first people who tend to see what I'm writing and will give me very direct feedback. And the basic rule is, don't let me put anything rubbish out. And they will see everything. So if they say, no, you lost the plot here, I trust them enough to kind of do that. But in terms of my readership, I do believe it's an artist's job is to kind of lead their audience in a way, not be led by the audience. And the way I survive is I have a mailing list that I've built over 20 years with just a few thousand people on it. Every single person on it I've earned by doing events. Maybe one of you will sign up to that mailing list tonight or something like that. And that core constituency kind of keep me alive, that's it, and I send out a monthly email to those and I get direct feedback from them, kind of thing, but nobody would ever say, you must do a piece like this or you must do a piece like that. So yeah, I don't know. So the critical side is there. Critics who write for newspapers I tend not to pay any attention to at all, because I tend to see them as people who just can't do what the artist does. They're failures. So they have no relevance really, and they're trying to make capital out of their kind of inadequacies.